Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host, and today is October 31st. It is, in fact, Halloween. And so we're going to be talking about Halloween, a little bit of the history of Halloween, and then a little bit of the history of trick-or-treating and trick-or-treating trends and all sorts of stuff that are associated with the day. And I realized as I was getting ready for this morning that I didn't have a costume to wear. So maybe I'm coming in the guise of a chocolate critic, but that's what I'm going to be doing today. And I'm glad that you're along for the ride with me today. I want to remind everybody that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. And you can go over to the Chocolate Life right now. Here's the home, here's the home page of the Chocolate Life. You can go over to the Chocolate Life right now. This is the home page, and it is live. So I can go and click on things and move around. If you want to support the work that I do here, there's a join button in the top navigation. Click on join. There's always a free membership, but if you do have the resources to support the work that I'm doing here financially, then please go and click on the join button, become a free member or a premium member. And as always, you can go into the live chat in YouTube or the comments in LinkedIn or Facebook, and you can go and let me know where in the world you're connecting from. Or if you have a comment or a question about today's episode, you can put it in the comments. I will get it up on screen. I'll do the shout out. I'll do my best to answer your question. If I can't answer it during the episode, I will answer it in the comments, either on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, or on the comments on the page for today's episode, which is a perfect segue to what it is that we're going to talk about today. Or what it is that I'm going to do next. So this is the homepage, and for every single episode of Pod Save Chocolate, I put together an episode, a post about that episode. But before I do there, what I want to do is I want to get, just for legibility, I'm going to get rid of this and replace it with this QR code. And the QR code, if you are watching this on a computer, you can scan the QR code with your phone, and it will bring up the page on the Chocolate Life on your phone for this episode. You can follow along. So the post is a link to resources and background and history. It provides, for the most part, what I think of as a run of show, because I'm not scripting this at all. I'm going through and doing this top of mind. It's one of the reasons why there are more ums and ahs and other kinds of verbal tics than I would like in the transcript. But you know that I'm doing it live. It's not scripted, not following along. So with all that out of the way, what I want to talk about first is a topic that was brought up in my episode from last Friday. Today is Friday, so last Tuesday. And that episode was the early education of a chocolate critic. And in it, a regular visitor, a regular watcher, was asking me about my Halloween gifting experiences. So what did I do when I was Halloweening or trick-or-treating with my children? And I gave an answer, and as a part of that answer, I remarked that I had some secret chocolate obsessions. And I think that most people do have secret chocolate obsessions. I'm going to make this a little bigger, make it easier to read for those people who are following along. So what is a secret chocolate obsession, and where did secret chocolate obsessions come from? In the early 2000s, so this is sometime around 2002, 2003, I started writing for the publishers of Chocolatier magazine. So in addition to Chocolatier magazine, they also publish Pastry Art and Design, and I was publishing a newsletter called the New World Chocolate Society newsletter, which was bound into Chocolatier. And as a part of my work with them, with the publishers, I also got involved in working with the World Pastry Forum and the World National Pastry Team Championships. But as part of my writing, so I was exposed as a part of that work for the forum and the championships to dozens of pastry chefs and chocolatiers. And I got the idea as I was writing that maybe it would be interesting to talk with these pastry chefs and chocolatiers. Well, when you're not in your kitchen and you're not eating your own chocolate, you're not eating the stuff that you make, right? What do you like to eat, right? And the answers I got back were pretty interesting. For example, a colleague of mine in New York City worked for major hotel chain as the executive pastry chef, then went to work for a Michelin-starred pastry chef in his restaurant in New York, said, and again, born in France, works in the US, said his favorite secret chocolate obsession was a Snickers bar, which is really unusual because the French generally are averse to peanuts. They're going to prefer almonds and they're going to prefer hazelnuts. But here is a French pastry chef who's working for, in the pastry kitchen of a Michelin-starred restaurant in New York City, is saying, when I have my spare time, I'm eating a Snickers bar. And then another gentleman working and known for his work producing Asian-inspired desserts, again for high-end restaurants in New York City, is saying, well, they like to eat Maltesers. And again, the background growing up as a child is where I think that comes from. Whereas I don't know where the interest in Snickers came from with my other chef friend. So I don't remember how many I did of those, but it occurred to me that as a part of this process, right, that it would make sense for me to share with them what my secret chocolate obsessions were. So here I am working for Chocolatier magazine. I have a chance to eat from the best pastry chefs or sample the work of the best pastry chefs and the best chocolatiers in the world. What am I? What am I eating that when I'm not eating that? And it turns out that I have three, right? Or identified three at the time. And they were Butterfinger, Almond Joy, not Mounds. Without the almonds, I think that Mounds are too sweet, and Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. And at this point, I want you, so if you're a craft chocolate fan, you're a specialty chocolate fan, you're eating 2-ingredient single origin chocolate, chances are around some holiday, whether that holiday is Halloween or it's Christmas, for example, maybe Hanukkah Gelt, right, is your secret chocolate obsession. Maybe it's something having to do with Valentine's Day or Easter. Do you have a secret chocolate obsession? So put into the comments, let me know when you're not, because I think everybody has this comfort chocolate that they go back to. And these are three of mine. And I realized as I was thinking about this, right, that I don't eat these things generally. I will not go, when I'm in my local grocery store or I'm in my local convenience store or in my local drugstore, pharmacy here in the United States, if for some reason or another, I walk down the candy aisle, I am not thinking about, oh, I need to buy a Butterfingers today. My consumption of my secret chocolate obsessions is limited to basically Halloween, and it's been many, many years, but going through the trick or treat bags of my children when they come back for their trick or treating exercises. And I can't tell you the last time I have had anything other than a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. I normally only have these things during Halloween. And so is there for you, and this is the question I'm asking, is there for you a connection between a childhood favorite, a secret chocolate obsession that you might have, again, as an adult, you're focusing on some sort of specialty chocolate, maybe 2-ingredient, 70% single origin chocolate, is what you have most of the time. But do you have something that, around Halloween, you're going trick or treating with your kids maybe, and you pull something out of the bag, or you're giving out Halloween candy and you're going, well, I'm going to take a couple of these and set them aside for myself, which probably is the circumstances for the last time I've eaten peanut butter cups. I've got a bowl full of candy. I'm waiting for trick-or-treaters to come by, and maybe I'm sort of surreptitiously, I can't hide it from myself. Maybe I think I can hide it from myself. I don't know the answer to that question. But I'm going for these if they're in the bowl. And I will preferentially buy assortments that have these in them, just to let you know. But what are yours? And then I was thinking about it this morning because I wrote this on Wednesday, these three choices. And I did say, how would you rank them on a tier list? And I decided, well, I would have to go and put together a tier list. And so in S tier, I'd put the Butterfinger. In A tier, I'd put Almond Joy and Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. In the B tier, maybe Snickers, peanut or almond M&Ms, not plain M&Ms, bit of honey, Goldberg's Peanut Chews, which are really out there in terms of alternative candies. They're maybe not all that popular today, but they're ones that I enjoy from 20 years ago. And Baby Ruth bars. And then I've added a tier, an O, a middle tier. So there are 3 above and 3 below. So rather than a six place tier, I have a seven place tier. So 3 Musketeers and 3 Musketeers with a nougat center. There's not a whole lot of chocolate. And this is sort of 3 Musketeers in general, all the different flavors that are available. Milky Way, Kit Kat or Twix, plain M&Ms, Mr. Goodbar, Payday, Skittles, Sweet Tarts, they're in there. The C tier is a Hershey with almonds. Anything sour, Nerds, Crackle bar. D tier would be Hershey bar or Hershey's Kisses. Sugar candies like the hard sugar candies, butterscotch, mints, and those sorts of things. Gums of any kind, gumdrops. And then in the F tier, not a fan of Necco wafers. And for anybody who doesn't know, the Necco, Necco in Necco wafers stands for New England Confectionery Company. So that's what Necco wafers are. They're the same process for the little candy hearts that you get around Valentine's Day. I believe they're similar, the same thing. I'm not a big fan of candy corn. I know many people are a huge fan of candy corn. It drops to the bottom of my list. Gumdrops covered with nonpareils, not a huge fan of those. You remember sort of like wax bottles filled with sweet syrup, and you bite off the top of the bottle and then you drink the syrup, and then you'd start chewing on the wax bottle. Not a big fan of those, although they were intriguing to me as a 10-year-old. And then there's what are the strips of paper that have the little candy dots on them, and you sort of, I don't know what those are called anymore, but they're down there on that list. So I just wanted to go through and talk about my secret chocolate obsessions and what I remember about candy bars as a kid, and mainly chocolate candy, and how I would rank those on a tier list. Let me know. Do you agree, disagree with any of my placements of any of these things? Do you have a favorite, something that I've overlooked that you think might be there? And if you do want to recommend a candy that you would put on the tier list, let me know where on the tier list you would put it, right? If you were to think about this 7 tier, what's your S category? What's your S and what's your F? Those are the 2 things I'm most interested in. But now that we've got through that, let's go and talk about Halloween through history. I don't want to spend, I want to spend way too much time on this, but because you can go and read this. I mean, that's the point of doing this here. You can go and read this after the fact. But Halloween, as it is practiced today, traces back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. I know it's spelled Samhain, but it is pronounced Samhain, which marks summer's end, and the start of the dark half of the year around November 1st. People believe the boundary between the natural world and the spirit world thinned. It made crossing over from one to the other, so spirits would be able to come to Earth and interact with people. The boundary between the worlds thinned, and people lit bonfires, wore disguises to confuse the spirits. That's where the getting up in costumes. So if I put something on, the spirit can't recognize me, it can't find me, it can't harm me. And they performed magical acts like divination, right, and telling the future and things like that. There is a summary of an Encyclopedia Britannica article which goes into depth about this. So early references are 10 to 12th century, so 900 to 1100s Irish folk tales. Detailed descriptions mainly appear in 18th century accounts from Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and the Isle of Man. So there is a history going back at this point, well over 1,000 years, although what we might be able to call detailed descriptions or written descriptions, are they reliable? I don't know the answer, but those descriptions start showing up in the 1700s. Some traditions link Samhain to pastoral cycles, so bringing in cattle, slaughtering pigs, and may have treated as a new year, but that's inconclusive. So that is the real, historical background of the festival itself. Now, with Christianization, so as the Catholic Church first and then the Protestant Church became more dominant in different parts of the British Isles, it wasn't United Kingdom at the time, the church established All Saints' Day. And so the church here is probably, I don't know if it's the Catholic Church or if it's the Church of England. I will have to go and look that up, and I will see if I can update this. But they established All Saints' Day, All Hallows, so it's probably the Catholic Church, going back that far, on November 1st, and All Souls' Day on November 2nd. The evening before became All Hallows' Eve. So All Hallows' Eve, the evening before All Saints' Day. And so there's another summary of this, that Samhain coincides with the Christian All Hallow Tide, which is the 3 days, All Hallows' Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day. It was established independently in the 9th century. So yeah, Catholic Church, I answered my own question. Halloween emerged from the blending of these Christian observances with regional folk practices. So, and then Irish and Scottish immigrants from the British Isles carried these historic practices to the United States in the 1800s during the mass immigration from that part of the world. So pumpkins, right? So that's the next thing. So let's talk about iconography. And apart from witches, I think that witches on brooms, particularly perhaps, I think that the most iconic representation of Halloween that I can think of is the jack-o'-lantern. And so pumpkins became tied to Halloween in North America during the mid to late 1800s. So it's relatively recent. As immigrant, so this is the Irish and Scottish immigrants coming from the British Isles, right? So as a replacement for more traditional plants that would have been used in their home. So replacing turnips and beets with shift to pumpkins, which were very abundant. And we have the earliest reporting around this, around jack-o'-lanterns, so carved pumpkin lanterns, maybe with or without the face, but lanterns that were opened up, scooped out, and then carved and lit from within. So pumpkin lanterns by the mid-1960s. But that carving tradition, the jack-o'-lantern, the carving tradition is older and Celtic, right? But in the US and Canada, the practice adapted to pumpkins, as I said, and migrated from general harvest decor to Halloween symbolism by the mid-1860s. So that's the history of the jack-o'-lantern and its association with pumpkins and with Halloween. The next sort of historical thing that I want to talk about is the spelling of Halloween. Does it have an apostrophe or not? So is Halloween or is it Halloween? The word itself, Halloween, comes from the phrase All Hallows Even, where evening is a contraction of evening. And then the even contraction is further shortened by getting rid of the V. So it's E, rather than even, it's E apostrophe En. So evening is contracted to een. And that is, as I learned, an archaic or poetic spelling of the word Halloween. Excuse me. But the modern, more commonly used is without an E. And I suppose I like being maybe archaic. Well, certainly poetic. I don't know if I like being archaic, but that's why I chose the spelling of Halloween that I did for its poetry. So I'm showing right now a photograph of a little house, which is right around the corner from me. So sort of coincidentally, here in the small town in Arizona where I live, I just happen to be right around the corner from one of the most desirable trick-or-treating streets in town. And one of the local elementary schools is along this town. That may be one of the reasons why it's so desirable as a neighborhood. I actually don't know um, how many children are to come by and trick or treat. Where I live is not on the street, so it's not obvious. It's up a long driveway, and I can't remember from last year if actually any children walked up for trick or treating. I don't recall. I haven't purchased a costume. I haven't actually purchased any Halloween candy to give away because I don't want it in the house because I will be tempted to eat it, and I don't need the calories. But I'm showing you here. If you can see it, this is a local haunted house. We have one house on the street where I live, which is known for just over the top displays on holidays, 4th of July, Christmas. It doesn't matter if there is a holiday, there's going to be an over the top gaudy display. And you can't see it, but there's a lot of Halloween figures, so skeletons and things like that on the lawn behind what is going to be a walk through haunted house or scare house this evening. So I am going to go out after dark and take a picture of the scare house, and I'm going to update this post and put the picture of the scare house after dark with the house and everything lighted up. But I live on a street which is a destination for trick or treaters coming by. So it's going to be interesting to see if I go out, how many children are out and about. I have, you know, I have some fond memories of trick or treating as a child. And I don't know about you. I grew up in Southern California. It was the 1960s and the 1970s, and I think my family was a little bit progressive in the sense that as a child growing up, I never ate white bread. Right? My mother never went to the store and never bought Wonder Bread. It was just not in the house. It was going to be some sort of whole wheat bread. My father was a baker, and he made seeded rye bread as so. That was my childhood memory. And at some point, the bakery, Wonder Bread, started making little tiny loaves of Wonder Bread, sliced Wonder Bread, right? And it was in a miniature version of the full-sized Wonder Bread wrapper. And I remember one year getting loaves of mini mini-sized loaves of Wonder Bread for Christmas and taking it back and going, wow, this is a really unusual experience for me. But otherwise, I'm tied up in in liking all the sort of standard kinds of Halloween candy giving, and how are we going to go get the most amount of candy? And at this point in time, so we're in the 60s, yeah, late 60s, early 70s. In the neighborhood I lived, we could go out without parental supervision, and which is not necessarily common today. But let's talk a little bit more about the history of trick or treating per se. And let's go back to the post. So let's talk a little bit about the history of trick or treating. So um, there are a bunch of traditions around Halloween, some of which are associated with sort of food related gifting and things like that. But for the most part, the early and modern customs around Halloween include what is called souling, right? So poor people begging for alms or soul cakes in association with prayer, so baked goods of one form or another. And then mumming and guising, which are costume performances, and then rituals, which are designed to keep the spirits at bay. Right? So what turns out that the phrase trick or treat looks like it originated in Canada in 1917. So the phrase trick or treat doesn't appear until 1917. The first time it apparently showed up in a newspaper in the United States was in 1928, and the first national publication mentioned in 1939. So the phrase trick or treat spread by newspapers and community campaigns in the 1930s through the 1950s, and then rapidly grew. It says driven here, just rapidly accelerated by post-war candy marketing led by Hershey, Mars, Curtis, and Brock's. So summary history, 1917, the first recorded mention of the phrase trick or treat, right, in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, as tricks or treats. Early variants from 21 to 2020, 1921 to 1924, again in Canada, in regional Ontario and Alberta newspapers. And then in 1928, in the Bay City, Michigan Times, was the first reference of trick or treats or trick or treating in the United States. And then it spread throughout the 30s and 40s. But the first time the phrase trick or treats or trick or treating appeared in a national publication was about 1939. So between 1928, which is when the phrase was first used, trick or treating was first used, and World War II. So in the roughly um, decade and a half between when the term was first introduced in the United States and the beginning of World War II, which is when sugar began to be rationed. So that's an important thing to understand, that the most common things to be handed out were apples, nuts. So I remember as a kid getting whole walnuts and whole almonds just in the bottom of my trick or treat bag. I don't know if that's common now. Pennies, that was sorts of things that we were handed out, and homemade popcorn balls and cookies. I'm old enough, so we're talking about trick or treating in the early 1960s. I'm old enough to remember getting homemade popcorn balls. And I don't remember about cookies and baked goods, but definitely homemade popcorn balls. And it wasn't an issue then, but there now would be considered to be unsanitary. Who knows what the conditions of the kitchen are, and people's hands, what precautions people were taking to be clean, and then what sort of ingredients might be added to them, which might not be good for you. And so all of those concerns, I remember the scare of razor blades and apples. I haven't been trick or treating right recently, so I don't know if that's still a scare, razor blades and apples. But in the 20s and 30s, lots of homemade stuff, popcorn balls, cookies, and then store-bought hard candies and simple chocolate bars. And the store-bought candies and simple chocolate bars, that slowed down considerably during World War II because of sugar rationing during World War II. So after World War II ended, commercial candy tie-ins to Halloween began to accelerate as sugar rationing ended in 1947. Right, major brands, again included Hershey, Mars, Curtis, and Brock's, began to place Halloween-specific ads and produce packaging in the 40s and early 50s that made it easy and sanitary and safer to hand out their candies, making it easier for people to go to the store and buy the candy than it was for people to make these things at home, right? And I thought it was interesting that I found this website called it's called The Vintage Inn, and here in this website, I just want to make sure that I know what it is that I've done here in terms of opening windows. They have this whole series of vintage advertisements around Halloween candies in the 40s and 50s. So a chewing gum whistle. I don't remember. I mean, if you're watching this and you're old enough, have you ever gotten a chewing gum whistle? I don't know that I've ever seen one of those. Cracker Jack, was Cracker Jack so candy coated popcorns, peanuts get a prize? I mean, are they still using that phrase? I remember it. I don't. I don't. I don't know that I was getting boxes of Cracker Jack. Maybe there were mini boxes. I don't recall, but maybe that was it. I mean, as a kid growing up, who didn't love caramel coated? I mean, I still love caramel coated popcorn. I don't use it very much, but if I'm going to get the caramel coated popcorn, I'm going to get it with peanuts. That's definitely for sure. Even though I'm not getting Cracker Jack, right? So Baby Ruth and Butterfinger. But here is an ad from again the 1940s. I think it is 1950s. It's really, really lovely. Just the illustrative. So Woolworths. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that there's a Woolworth dime store, and the one, however, in my town didn't. I don't think it had a counter, a lunch counter, but they were known for that. But here are costumes for $1.98, maybe very, very thin plastic that could be done. We have a Tootsie Roll. Going through my secret chocolate obsession and putting through my tier list, Tootsie Pops and Tootsie Rolls didn't occur to me. So I may have to go back and think about Tootsie Rolls and Tootsie Pops and put them on that list. The Milky Way, um, another ad for Milky Way and other Mars products, Baby Ruth, Butterfinger, a Safety Pop. So Safety Pops and Ring Pops? I mean, I don't remember Ring Pops being a thing when I was a kid. They were certainly a thing when my daughter was trick or treating. Not a huge fan. Um, but and then I'm thinking, what else have I missed? Milk Duds, Junior Mints, all these. They're all these things. Part of my childhood candy gifting. But I love. Oh my gosh, getting little snack packs of breakfast cereal. If we were getting, Sugar Smacks, loved them as a kid. Sugar Pops, loved them as a kid. Frosted Flakes, I gotta say, yeah, I would have loved those getting up. I was never a big bubblegum fan. So getting Double Bubble or Bazooka, although if you got Bazooka, you get the little comics inside. Love those, but not a big gum, never a big gum chewer, a bubblegum fan. So this is just some vintage, roughly 1940s and 1950s ads around different candies. It just love the from this remove the sort of visual naivete of what's going on. It's very, very much reminiscent of the time. Very, very cool. Very, very cool stuff. Um, and if I can find more links to more archives of these images, I can put more of them up. Okay. So, but the post-war pivot to candies. So pre-war, there was a lot of homemade things, popcorn balls and baked goods like cookies would have been. Would have been a big part of what went into your trick or treating bag. But post-war, um, there was a pivot to candy again, driven by the big confectionery companies, and then accelerated by the ending of rationing on sugar after the war. But Jack and Jill magazine, I don't know that I remember Jack and Jill magazine, but certainly Highlights magazine, and Rufus and Gallant. There might have been advertising in them. I don't remember, but the marketing around them. But there might have been stories about children going house to house. I could really imagine there being a Rufus and Gallant cartoon about trick or treating etiquette. I'll have to go look and see if there is one now that I've asked that question. I need to remind myself. Let's go grab a piece of paper and a note. Rufus and Gallant. Is that the right name? Trick or treat etiquette. I'm going to find out if I can find a cartoon. If I do, I'll go put it in the episode. I'll go put it in the post for today. So Hershey's and Mars, World War II scale production and post-war distribution made them Halloween candy kings, which began cementing their dominance. And both of these companies had spent quite a bit of time buying up other companies, which is one of the things that cemented their continued dominance in the companies. Mars and Hershey are in the top 10 global confectionery company brands. So it's that dominance, which started in the 1940s and 1950s, has continued through the day. This was all supported by the language in advertisements, which are coming up. Local papers began using trick or treat in ads by the 1940s, as early as 1943. So during World War II, in advertising as opposed to editorial context, with prominent retail promotions in the early 1950s. And then Peanuts started talking about Halloween, and specifically, it was the introduction of the Great Pumpkin in a July 1959 or an October 1959 comic strip, as well as a movie by Disney called Trick or Treat. I don't know this Disney movie called Trick or Treat, was introduced in 1952. So that's sort of the history of trick or treating. Is there any discontinuity there? Have I left out something you think should be in that history? I don't know what I couldn't find much discussion of the going door to door and putting out a basket and asking for things pre 1928 here in the United States, because that's the first time the phrase appears. Were people going door to door to get stuff for Halloween pre-1928? If they weren't calling it trick or treating, I don't know what they were calling it. I mean, I didn't find anything which suggested that was happening. So it's oh, so 1925. So in 3 years, this might be something for people to start thinking about. In 3 years is the 100th anniversary of the first time the phrase trick or treat appeared in print in the United States. And so it's not the 100th anniversary of Halloween, but it's the 100th anniversary of trick or treating in the United States. Might be something for somebody who's got a Halloween-centric brand or products. Oh, Peeps? Peeps? Marshmallow Peeps? Are there pumpkin marshmallow Peeps? I tend to think of them as Easter, but I'm thinking about tier list. Where do things fit on the tier list? Marshmallows, house-made marshmallows, and commercially made marshmallows. I'd have to go find out when the commercially made marshmallows started being bagged and sold in the United States. But marshmallows were among the things, in addition to popcorn balls, maybe melted down popcorn and not melted down popcorn, but melted down marshmallows and mixed it in with popcorn. Certainly we do that with crispy rice treats and things like that today. I'd have to go back and figure out what that history was if people are interested in my doing that. But it's just fascinating to me. So let's end today's episode. We're going to end it. It's going to be a short episode today. Trick-or-treating trends. So as we start thinking about trends, let's take a look at stats. So an estimated 41 million children. So the population of the United States is, I'm just going to call it 350 million people. So 40 into 350. So let's say that of the 350, a third of those, 120 million, are of trick-or-treating age, just rough. So let's say that roughly 40% of children of trick-or-treating age, so 40% of children of trick-or-treating age are going to go out and trick-or-treat this year. That number may be way off. If you want, I can do some research into what that stat is. So, but 41 million children and an unspecified number of adults are going to be walking around neighborhoods across the United States tonight in search of tricks or treats. 3/4 of all households will participate in some form or another. Unfortunately, this year, I'm not one of them, right? And spending associated with Halloween on its own is going to be $13 billion, up over 10% from last year, even though the cost of chocolate, the cost of cocoa, the cost of sugar, the cost of imported anything has gone up considerably. And how much of the 13% increase in spending is just because of inflation or tariffs or things like that? That's not broken out in the statistics. I don't know necessarily how you would break it out in statistics, but families will spend an average of over $100. So 75% of American households will participate, spending an average of $100 each on costumes, decorations, and candy. With $4 billion, with the spend relatively evenly spent, spread between the two of them. So roughly 1/3 on costumes, 1/3 on decorations, and 1/3 on candy, which is pretty interesting. And about 36%, so a third of Americans, I wonder, again, I apologize, and I did not find the source material. In this research, I don't know what the age distribution is. So it's 30% of all of Americans, but of children of trick-or-treating age, right? Is Halloween their favorite? Or is Christmas their favorite, or Hanukkah their favorite, or it may not be Valentine's Day, so that makes sense. But Easter candy is another opportunity. So 30%, so a third of Americans say that Halloween is their favorite holiday, and New York City ranks as the best place to celebrate. I haven't lived in New York City now for over 2.5 years. I'm still receiving random email about the New York Halloween parade, which goes through the West Village. I used to live in the West Village. I used to love watching the parade come up and down the street. New York City is one of the best places for parades, whether it is the Macy's, the Thanksgiving Day parade, whether it's the Puerto Rican Day parade, whether it is the Halloween parade. I mean, if you want to go see a parade, other than I think the Rose Parade in California on New Year's Day, Los Angeles, Pasadena specifically on New Year's Day, then New York City is a great place to go if you love parades. And if you haven't been and seen the Thanksgiving Day parade going down Broadway from Central Park West, it's something you should consider going to New York City for. It's really quite remarkable. So not only do a third of Americans say that Halloween is their favorite holiday, right? But the top costumes this year include characters from K-pop Demon Hunters, right? Which I've heard of. I haven't watched it, although I think it's available streaming on one of the services that I subscribe to. So I know of K-pop Demon Hunters. I know what Minecraft is, right? But I don't know what the chicken jockey character in Minecraft is. So I'm not that. And I've never heard of Labubu dolls. So obviously I don't have a child of trick-or-treating age. But that is what this year's Thanksgiving looks like. Spend is going to be up by 13%. I don't know that's because people are spending more, right, in relative terms, or if it's just absolute terms because of the increase in the cost of cocoa, the increase of cost of almost anything, and the impact of tariffs on the cost of living here in the United States. Costumes, if they're manufactured in China, might have been subject to import tariffs that weren't here last year. So a lot of stuff going on that affect that. Over the course of the last 20 years or so, there has been an increase on messaging around ethical chocolate. So chocolate, which specifically does not contribute to illegal labor. And so there's a lot of work with NGOs and certifiers and mission-led brands who are talking about that. And one major component of that is called reverse trick-or-treating, which is when somebody comes to your door and what you do is you hand out information to the child, which apparently they're going to give to their parents, or you might hand out ethical chocolate and use it as a way to message children that you need to be more careful about what it is that you're consuming. I'm not necessarily a big fan of politicizing Halloween as a holiday and doing it by trying to educate the children. I think educating adults is a really, really good idea. And I don't necessarily know. And this is part of the conversation I had, I believe it was with Jen in the last episode, is about this notion of the politicization. I think that big chocolate in general needs to be held to account. And I think that figuring out how to provide as much consumer intervention, so how do we change buying patterns, is really, really important. Because the only way that big chocolate is going to change its sourcing practices is if consumers vote with their pocketbooks. We want you to change your sourcing practices. We want to make sure that you are not hurting people, right, to produce the raw ingredient for which chocolate is made. Again, I don't know that handing stuff to a small child is the way to go about doing that. It may be. I'm not convinced that it is. A big trend, as not just in Halloween, but around the world, is things around allergen free, making people more aware of the fact that many candies do contain common allergens. And so there is something which is called the Teal Pumpkin Project, and which is part of a food allergy organization called FAIR. And the idea being is that you can put signs out on your yard, and you can let people know that parents know, particularly, you can let parents know that when children come to your door, you're going to be handing out trick or treats, which are friendly to children who have common allergies, and which is pretty cool. So this actually, one of the reasons why I wanted to mention it, um, is that whether if you are a chocolate maker, right, and you are at all making any sort of allergen claim around your chocolate, uh, and you are producing anything which is in a Halloween friendly format, which you probably should be, right? That being able to promote to your local community and be able to promote to your customer base via email that you are producing allergen friendly, which is safe for Halloween gifting, could be something that you want to consider. Obviously, too late for today, but for next year, think about Halloween and how you're going to market everything together. And so I think that taking a look at what the programs like the Teal Pumpkin Project are doing, again, if you are a chocolate maker or you're a confectioner and you are making allergen claims, that this becomes a really, really interesting way to leverage what it is that you're doing and make it part of something where there's an organization spending a lot of marketing money that you can ride along with, take advantage of, not in a negative sense, but take advantage of. And so I think that think about that. I mean, if you want to make sustainability and ethical sourcing related to illegal labor claims, that figuring out a way to be able to communicate to parents around this notion of ethical sourcing of cocoa and ethical sourcing of other ingredients and why people would want to buy your product to gift with, to treat people with, is a good idea. And can you make products which will um, which you can give out to people? I mean, it's an interesting question. I've been in places where the adults have had trick or treat parties. Well, so the babysitter or the housekeeper or somebody or or an older sibling is out taking the kids around the block doing things. The parents get together and they're enjoying themselves on the day, and they're the ones who are handing out the candy to the children who are coming by, but they're having a party while they're doing it. This might be a good way to educate adults who are getting together and celebrating as adults will do the day, as opposed to celebrating as children will do on the day. So something to consider there, I think, around how do you take how do you make use of the holidays in perhaps non-traditional ways to be able to grow your brand? So big shout out to Jen. Hey, thanks for watching again today. Happy Halloween. Happy Halloween to everybody. I prefer not to push world or political views on children if I don't have to. Definitely a touchy subject. Yeah, I think, again, one of the things that I'm worried about in this particular, and I don't know that I thought about it or articulated until you pointed out quite this way, Jen, is is something like reverse trick or treating, or is something like the Teal Pumpkin Project, where we're talking about allergens, um, might these be considered woke? And I haven't heard a lot of talk because, again, I'm not out there buying things for Halloween, whether it's decorations or costumes or candy, right? Um, I wonder about the wokeification of Halloween. And do we want to do that? And the answer is, I think not, right? What we want to do, again, I hope what we're doing is that we're trying to preserve this as a fun thing for kids to do, right? Perhaps be around with friends and neighbors, school chums, and all that sort of stuff. And is the politicization of it a good idea or a bad idea? I think it's a bad idea. But there is a discussion to be had around the treats that people get, right? Which talk about how the ingredients used in them are sourced, right? And how we communicate about that. Because, as I mentioned just a few minutes earlier, the only way that big chocolate is going to change its sourcing practices is if consumers change their buying practices. And there is a difference between stated purchase intent and actual purchasing. And people can say, oh, I'm all for products which don't involve illegal labor. But when they go to the store and they see that something is $5, right, and it's labor free or child labor free, and they see something which is $3 and it doesn't say anything about it, and they're going, oh my gosh, I need to buy enough to be able to hand out candy to 300 people or 500 people. That intent to go, I don't want to support illegal practices or unethical practices, sort of goes out the window when it comes to the practicality of, right, going to the checkout counter and going, how much did I just spend on this? So it is a delicate balancing act. And what I would do right now, right, the recommendation that I will make to people is exactly what I said just a few minutes ago, which is Halloween 2028 is the 100th anniversary of the first time the phrase trick or treat appeared in publication in the United States. Start thinking about it now. Connect to the 100th anniversary of trick or treating and develop this as a multi-year marketing campaign and thought campaign that you can communicate with to your local community, right? And that you can communicate to the people who are on your email list. I think that might be a really, really strong way to start thinking about many of these ideas. And that's what I'm going to leave you with. I hope that if it's late enough in the day, right, you're in Paris, if that's where you're watching. I mean, I've spent 5, 6, 7 Halloweens, October 31st in Paris, and seen what Paris looks like as it tries to, I mean, it has this weird love-hate affair with Americans in general. And so as it goes and does trick-or-treating and dresses up for Halloween in what I think of as very American ways. So if you haven't been in Paris over Halloween, that's another thing you might want to do, because it's really quite interesting to see how they embrace the holiday in downtown Paris. I'm usually there for the Salon du Chocolat today. The Salon is going on today, and I'm not there, unfortunately. But again, if you haven't been to Paris for the Salon, it's an excuse to go and see everything else there is to do in terms of chocolate in Paris. And with that, I'm done for today. So thank everybody for joining me today. I'm going to, again, remind everybody that this episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. This is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. I'm sharing with you. There's a join button in the top navigation. Click on join. There's always a free membership. There's been a free membership since the Chocolate Life was launched in January of 2008. But, right, there are also premium membership opportunities available for as little as $5 a month. Upper tiers include coaching and consulting services. And that's what pays to keep the lights on here at Chocolate Life World Headquarters. It pays for the hosting, it pays for software updates, it pays for the services on analytics, and all the sorts of things that need to get done to pay for keeping the Chocolate Life on the air, and the subscription to StreamYard to pay for the services of hosting this episode, but posting Pod Safe Chocolate for the next year. The renewal is in just a couple of weeks. And if you're interested in supporting the work that I do here, just get in touch with me and saying, "Hey, Clay, I'd like to donate to help support I'd like to help support the cost of the streaming service, StreamYard, that I'm using to host this." So that's it. If you're out with children and you're going trick or treating, listen, be safe. But remember, it's supposed to be fun, because if you're working with chocolate and if you're working with chocolate, you're trick or treating and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. And with that, everybody, until the next time, ciao.